The warden said no at first. In 30 years, no inmate on death row had ever asked to see a dog. But then, as the morning sun crawled across the concrete floor of the holding chamber, inmate number 4128, Lucas Remy, repeated his request. Just let me see her. 1 minute. That's all I need. Outside, in the cold dawn light, the retired K-9 waited beside an unmarked white van. She hadn't been near him in 8 years. But the moment her ears perked and she whined low in her throat, one of the guards stepped back. Something was about to break, and none of them were ready for it. Lucas Remy had always known how to read a room. He knew when a man wanted to fight, and when a man was just afraid. He knew how long to keep quiet, how long to stare without blinking, and when to ask for mercy without sounding like he meant it. But this morning, in the pale green light of Cell Block C, he didn't need to read anything. Everyone around him was already broken open. Warden Gallagher kept the paperwork close to his chest like a dealer guarding his last hand. You've had all your appeals, Lucas. This isn't a bargaining table. I'm not bargaining, Lucas said calm. I'm asking. Gallagher flicked his cigarette out against the metal doorframe. You want to see a dog? I want to see her. K-9 Delta. The one I handled for 7 years. I want her here. You killed a state trooper. Lucas didn't flinch. I know. The silence that followed clung to room like sweat on stone. Behind them, Officer Jeffrey stood like a cinder block wall. Face blank, arms crossed. She's retired. Lucas said, living with some family upstate. I heard. You can check my file. I never asked for nothing in all these years. Not even a priest. This is it. Gallagher didn't say anything for a long moment. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a silver pen, the kind that clicked loudly and carried weight. 1 minute, he said finally. She comes to the transport yard. You'll be shackled. Lucas nodded once. Understood. It had rained in the night. The kind of slow, steady rain that didn't clean anything, just made the rust on the fences run, and the blacktop sweat oil. The transport yard smelled like wet metal and diesel. Delta stood at the edge of the gate, tail low, head tilted slightly. Her coat had gone grayer since Lucas last saw her, but her eyes were still sharp, still watching. Jeffrey stood with 2 other guards, one holding the leash, the other gripping a stun baton. Warden Gallagher remained near the outer door, arms folded, watching everything with the quiet authority of someone waiting for something to go wrong. Lucas walked slow, legs chained, wrist-bound. The clink of the shackles echoed off the cement walls. Delta took a single step forward, then another. Easy, the leash-holding guard muttered. But Delta didn't bolt or bark. She just stared. When Lucas dropped to his knees in front of her, every man watching felt a change in the air, like a shift in pressure before a storm. Hi, girl, Lucas whispered. You remember me? Delta let out a low, uncertain whine, then closed the distance in a blink, pushing her nose into his chest, tail sweeping like a tired pendulum. Lucas didn't cry, but his voice cracked. Good girl. Still listening. Even now. Jeffries turned his face away. The leash-holding guard said nothing. Gallagher didn't move. Delta had been more than a partner. She'd been Lucas's anchor during the years he was still on the force. Back before the traffic stop went sideways. Back before Trooper Klein got shot. Back before everything rotted. Lucas hadn't spoken about that night since the trial. Not once. Not to his public defender. Not to the prison psychiatrist. Not even to God. But now, in front of Delta, he leaned close and said something. Quiet. Private. One line. Delta whimpered. Then barked. Once. Sharp. Loud. And then she did something none of the guards expected. She pulled away from the leash, sat square in front of Lucas, and placed her paw, slow and deliberate, right on his knee. The leash clinked free. The collar was old, loose. Someone hadn't checked it tight enough. Or maybe it had never really fit right. The stunned baton guard stepped forward. Jeffrey stopped him with a single hand. Don't. Gallagher finally moved. Lucas, he called out, voice steady, official. You've had your minute. Lucas looked up. I know. But he didn't stand, didn't move. Delta stayed with him, whining softly, pressing closer. Later, in the observation chamber, Warden Gallagher stared at a grainy monitor, the sound still off. "Something's not right," he muttered. Officer Jeffries leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Dog didn't bite, didn't bolt, just laid down, right on top of him. "She's trained," Jeffrey said. "Knows when someone's hiding something." Gallagher narrowed his eyes. "You think he told her something?" "He told her something. All right. Question is, what the hell are we going to do about it?" In a room just off the yard, Lucas sat alone, shackled again. Delta had been gently led away by the vet, but she'd resisted every step. He hadn't cried. Not really. But something had left him, some weight in his chest that had settled for too long. Across from him, Jeffries pulled out a chair. Saturday. For once, not with crossed arms. Not with judgment. Just a man looking at another man. You had a minute. You used it to tell a dog something. Lucas met his eyes. Not just a dog. Jeffries nodded once. So what was it? Lucas stared down at the scratches on the table. "I told her where to find the box." Jeffries went still. "What box?" Lucas didn't answer, but he looked up, and his eyes, calm now, held something Jeffries hadn't seen before. Hope. The rain had stopped by late afternoon, but the clouds never moved on. They just sat low over Pine Ridge like a wet wool blanket, heavy and choking the light. The town population, 2,807, didn't usually get much attention. Folks kept their heads down and stayed out of each other's business. But by nightfall, four patrol units and one marked K9 van pulled up outside a weather-beaten bungalow on Sycamore Lane. Retired K9 Delta sat in the passenger seat, eyes locked on the porch. "She hasn't taken her eyes off it since we got here," said Jeffries, standing beside her handler's van. Warden Gallagher stepped up next to him, arms folded tight. "You sure this is a place?" Lucas Remy had written it down on the back of a visitor request form. One address. Nothing else. No explanation, no hint. Just that if they wanted the truth about what happened the night Trooper Klein died, they'd find it there, and they'd need Delta to show them where. Delta hopped down without hesitation, nails clicking on the pavement. Her movement had changed, no longer slow or aged. Purpose pulled her forward. The house was set back under leaning pines, shutters crooked, though its steps soft with rot, porch sagging in the middle. She didn't sniff around the yard. She didn't even glance at the door. She walked straight beneath the porch, into the low crawl space, then stopped, stiffened, and barked. 3 short, sharp barks, the kind that said here. Gallagher called in a team. An hour later, they found the box. It wasn't buried deep, just shoved in the foundation, wrapped in black contractor plastic and duct tape. Old, dry, but not forgotten. It smelled faintly of cedar, maybe gasoline. Jeffrey stood over it while forensics cut it open. Inside, a Beretta. Serial number filed off. Some blood-stained cloth. And one laminated badge. Trooper Elijah Klein. But there was more. A voice recorder. The cheap kind sold in gas stations and truck stops. The text played it on site. And everything changed. Gallagher stood with his back to the patrol cars, fists clenched as the voice crackled out of the speakers. Klein's voice, shaky, nervous, recorded over a bed of crickets and the whine of wind through pine. "Don't trust the chief. He's setting something up. Told me to plant the gun, but I'm not doing it. Not on Remy. Not after everything he's covered for. The girl, the meth house. They'll kill me if they know I'm recording this, but I can't." Static, then silence. The rest of the tape was corrupted, but it was enough. Jeffrey sat in his cruiser, engine off, hands trembling over the wheel. Delta lay in the back seat, watching him like she still had more to say. He'd been a rookie when it happened, had looked up to Chief Harlan like a father. Everyone had. Harlan was the kind of man who brought casseroles to funerals and coached Little League. But Lucas had been the quiet one, kept to himself, did his job, didn't complain when assignments went dark or when the rot started spreading through their unit. He remembered Klein's funeral, remembered how Harlan had eulogized him like a son. And how Lucas didn't say a damn word, didn't defend himself, didn't even flinch when the cuffs clicked shut. Back at the prison, Lucas waited. His execution had been scheduled for 9 p.m. It was 8:32. Gallagher stood outside his cell, clipboard tucked under one arm, a pale look in his eyes. "We found the tape," he said quietly. Lucas looked up, and Gallagher exhaled slowly. "Governor's office is calling it in. You've got to stay." Lucas didn't smile, didn't cry. He just looked past Gallagher to the far wall, where a shadow of iron bars fell across the bricks like a cage drawn in charcoal. She remembered, he murmured. Delta was back in her foster home by midnight. Jeffrey sat on the porch with a cup of black coffee gone cold, watching her sleep through the screen door. She'd curled up beside her worn blanket, breathing steady, chest rising and falling with that same quiet dignity she carried into the prison yard. He thought about the paw on Lucas's knee, the look in her eyes, like she knew what had to be done, like she understood. Lucas was moved out of death row and placed into protective custody by the weekend. His case reopened. Ballistics confirmed the gun in the box matched the one used on Klein. But the prints? Partial. Smudged. Not Lucas's. 2 weeks later, Chief Harlan was found dead in a cabin upstate. Apparent suicide. But there were no powder burns on his hands. And no suicide note. Jeffries read the report twice before tossing it into the fire. Some things weren't meant for the public record. Some truths rotted quietly under porches until a dog dug them out. On the morning of Lucas's release, 4 months later, he didn't pack much. A box of books. A photo of Delta, young and alert beside a patrol car. Her vest now faded and folded neatly. She wasn't there to greet him. She'd passed quietly during the winter, heart finally giving out while curled on that same old blanket. The vet said she went in her sleep. But Jeffrey showed up, hat in hand, uniform pressed, badge polished. He didn't say anything when he saw Lucas, just held out a leash. On it, a pup, golden coat, alert ears, one white paw. "She's Delta's granddaughter," Jeffrey said. Lucas looked down at her. The pup wagged, unsure, but not afraid. "She doesn't know how to track yet," Jeffries added. "Still learning." Lucas knelt, held out his hand. The pup licked it once. Saturday. Looked up at him like she already knew. "She'll figure it out," Lucas said, voice hoarse. "In time." The hills above Pine Ridge turned gold in late spring, as if the dry grass had been painted by memory. Lucas hadn't driven those winding roads in nearly 9 years. He kept his hands at 10 and 2, slow around the corners, the puppy, now a lanky adolescent, curled up on the passenger seat. She was quiet, alert, watching the world with wide, thoughtful eyes. Her name was Echo, not his idea. Jeffries had suggested it. "She remembers," he'd said, "like Delta did, like you do." Lucas hadn't answered then. But now, as the town dipped into view, he whispered, "Heel, Echo." She perked up instantly, sat straighter. Ready. Lucas wasn't free. Not really. They called it release pending full exoneration, which meant he could go where he wanted, but he wasn't allowed to talk to press, leave the county, or carry a weapon. As far as most folks were concerned, he was still guilty, just complicated. The house waiting for him on Morrow Ridge Road wasn't much. Just a 2-room cabin, borrowed from a cousin who didn't ask questions. A rusted mailbox leaned sideways under an elm, and the windows still had faded tape excess from some long-forgotten storm. He let Echo out of the truck. She bounded into the yard, nose to the weeds, then froze, back rigid, tail up. Lucas stepped out behind her. "Something wrong, girl?" She didn't bark, just stared toward the tree-line. A figure stepped out of the brush. Jeffries, civilian clothes, eyes tired. Lucas didn't move. "You tracked me." "You signed the visitor sheet wrong," Jeffries said, shrugging. "No one spells Davenport with 3 P.S." Lucas didn't smile, just nodded. "Coffee's inside. If you want it." They stood in silence for a few seconds longer before heading in. Echo followed, tail brushing the floor. The old coffee maker hissed like it was dying, but it worked. The 2 men sat across from each other, same as they had in the prison. Only now, no chains, no guards. Just ghosts. Got something you should see, Jeffrey said, pulling out a flash drive. He slid it across the table. Lucas stared at it. Jeffries continued. Body cam footage. Trooper Klein's. It was marked unrecoverable in the original investigation. Turns out someone in the tech department flagged it, but never followed through. Guess they figured no one cared anymore. Lucas picked it up. Wait it. You watched it? Jeffries nodded. Twice. And Jeffries stared down into his cup. You weren't the one holding the gun. Lucas exhaled. Not relief. More like exhaustion. What do they want me to do with it? Lucas asked. Nothing, Jeffries said. The DA's going public next week. Full exoneration. You'll be free. The word hung in the air like something too fragile to touch. 3 days later, Lucas stood beside Echo in the clearing behind his cabin. The leash lay coiled at his feet. She sat perfectly still beside a rusted metal plaque half buried in pine needles. It read, K9 Delta, 2010 to 2024. Faithful, even when the world forgot. The soil was still soft. Lucas knelt and placed a worn black collar on the stone. Then he whispered something only Echo heard. She leaned into him, whined low, then went quiet. The story hit national headlines by June. Death row trooper exonerated after K9 leads investigators to buried evidence. Lucas refused interviews. Jeffries gave one. Brief, blunt, said everything that needed to be said. Sometimes you put your trust in the wrong men, but the right ones, even if they're four-legged, they bring the truth to the surface. One humid evening in August, Echo stopped at the back fence and barked. One bark, then sat. Lucas stepped out, still drying his hands. What is it? He called. Towel slung over his shoulder, but she didn't move, just stared toward the edge of the woods. A boy stood there. Couldn't have been more than 12. Thin, pale, clothes torn, eyes hollow. Lucas froze. Echo didn't bark again. She just waited. The boy took one cautious step forward, then another. Lucas moved slowly toward him. You okay? The boy didn't answer, just looked down at Echo, then held out a shaking hand. She sniffed it, licked it once, then sat beside him, like she'd already made her choice. The sheriff's department came 20 minutes later. The boy wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, but he wouldn't leave Echo's side either. By dawn, they identified him. Name, Caleb Rowe. Missing for 6 months. Last seen at a gas station 2 counties over. He'd escaped something. Something no one wanted to say out loud. Lucas watched from his porch as they led the boy away. Echo trotting beside him like she'd always been there. Jeffrey stood beside the cruiser, arms crossed. You sure you're done with all this? He asked. Lucas leaned on the post. I thought I was. And now? Lucas glanced down the road, where the boy and the dog disappeared over the hill. I think Delta passed the leash for a reason. That night, he opened the back door, called one word into the trees. Echo. And after a long, silent moment, she returned, panting, tired, but wagging. He let her in, closed the door, sat beside her on the floor as thunder rolled in the distance. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like something was missing. Just quiet. Just the kind of peace you only get after everything's been taken. And something worth keeping is given back.